This is one of those flies that covers a couple of bases, and it's really useful because of that. It's based around a kind of Czech Nymph style fly. You know, there's lots of different terminology used for European nymphing techniques these days, aren't there? You know, Euronymph, Spanish nymphing, all that kind of thing. But this Czech Nymph pattern, this style of fly, is one of those pioneering patterns that really has changed the game in lots of sorts of fishing. It's terrific for use in that Euronymph style. So you can either fish this with a French leader or a Spanish leader, Polish leader, you name it, or you can fish it on a Euronymph line. So one of the mega fine diameters floating lines, two of these tied on and chucked into some shallow riffle is a really dynamic way of fishing. The pattern I'm going to show you now covers a couple of bases, so it can be seen as a Gammarus, it can be seen as a freshwater shrimp basically, or it can be seen as a kind of a caddis pattern. The hook I have in the vise is a size 12 Hanak H300 BL, which is a terrific hook for this sort of pattern. It's got a nice wide gape, which means that the hook point is quite a long way from the hook shank. I do actually sometimes also tie this using klinkhammer hooks, so hooks that are designed for dry fly fishing. Again, because of the gape, the distance between the shank of the hook and the hook point. Tying thread is a plain olive Nanosilk, and I'm just going to lay on a little bit of that to get us going. I do tie this in a slightly different way to some people though, just to let you know, and I'll explain my reasoning behind it as we go through. It's all about building up the layers with this, as with any sort of fly that you're going to be tying. And the first thing I need to do is add some weight to my hook. Now I'm going to be doing that using lead strip, this stuff. Just a plain flat lead wire. You can of course use round wire for this, but I prefer doing it this way, and I'll explain to you why as I go. Often with this lead wire you get self-adhesive wire which you can attach to the hook and wind it round and create the weight that way, but I like doing it by putting all of the weight on top of the hook. Now there are two reasons for this. Firstly, it preserves that gape between the shank and the point of the hook, which for me means I get cleaner hookups. And secondly, it also occasionally helps the hook to flip over, so it fishes almost upside down, a little bit like a jig hook. So I tie all the weight on top, and I do that by adding progressively shorter lengths of this lead strip. So let's start that now. So as I said, I've tied on with my Nanosilk tying thread. This is very fine thread, and one of the keys here is to not pull too hard. Okay, so just with very sort of soft hands, I'm just going to attach the first layer of lead strip to the top of my hook, and I'm not going to go all the way to the eye, just leave a couple of millimeters gap. But really, soft hands is very important here. If you pull too hard, it will simply cut, the silk will cut straight through the lead strip, which is useful when you want it to happen, like now. So I've reached the point where I'm happy with that lead being in the right place, and all I'm going to do is just pull the thread and it breaks the lead strip like so. And I'm going to return my tying thread to the middle again, just kind of level with the point of the hook. Next, I'm going to tie on a slightly shorter piece of lead strip. Same routine. Nice, soft hands, gentle turns of tying thread. Just a little bit shorter again, and this time I'm going to break off. I don't want to pull too hard because I'll pull straight through the other bit as well. A third shorter strip goes on top, shorter yet again. So as you can see, getting progressively shorter. And when I get there, I'm going to break off, and I'm going to do one more strip of lead across the whole lot. So front to back again, like so. Now the advantage here, as I've mentioned, is that you preserve the gap between the shank of the hook and the hook point, which means when you're fishing, you are going to get cleaner hookups. Again, I can go past the end of there and I can just use the thread to just cut that off and return to the middle again. You can probably already see that the profile of this is very shrimpy, which is why it's great as a Gammarus imitation. Again, also very much like a caddis. Now, the next part is to suss out the order that you're going to tie the rest of the materials in. So you go basically last to first. So the first thing I'm going to tie in now is the rib, which will be the last thing that comes over. For the rib, I'm simply using a piece of monofilament fishing line. Actually, that's fluorocarbon fishing line. It can be mono, it doesn't have to be fluoro. This is just £3 stuff. Something you can pull hard enough that it's not going to snap on the way over. And I'm just going to attach that to my fly, finishing at the end there, and I'm just going to pop that into the retaining spring on my vise to keep it out of the way of everything else. Okay, now the next material that I'm going to use is stretch back, and that's this stuff. This is a Hends material. This one's actually clear. I'm not going to use that for the tie, but I was just showing you that so you can see the packet. This comes in lots of different colours, and actually this pattern of fly I tie in various different colours, especially in the winter, for example, when grayling fishing. It comes, let me just show you this one, in bright pink. This is phenomenal for grayling, really is. But this pattern, I'm going to use an olive one, which is this colour. This is just perfect for this type of crossover fly, which is a cross between a Gammarus and a caddis. And I've just trimmed off a piece that's a couple of inches long. Might get 2 flies out of that. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to trim off the end in a little V shape. Just with the tips of my scissors, like so. Just gone a little bit too far with that. Just do that once more. Just a little tiny point so that you can tie it into the end of the fly, like so. Hope you can see that okay. Now all I'm going to do is just take my tying thread back down to the last part of the fly, and I'm going to just hold this in place with my left hand. I'm a left-handed tyer, so then I'm going to use the index finger of my right hand to just pin that point behind the tying thread like so, and then just trying to catch it in with a few turns of thread, so that what you don't get is that bulky fold over that you get with some of these patterns. Just a little bit neater, like so. Then I can pull that out of the way and just chuck in a couple of turns of thread that side. It's really important that you secure this, this material nice and firmly to the back of the fly, because when you pull it over the top, when all the rest of the dressing is in, there will be a little bit of tension on this. So it's important it's really nicely tied in. Now the next part of the process here, and this is something I've just started doing the last season or so, is to add basically an under rib. So I've got some green holographic tinsel. This is a texturing green olive, which is lovely. Really nice holographic material, just catches the light. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie it in, just move my thread down a couple of turns, and catch it into the body of the fly, and that will come underneath the rubber stretch back material. So just a few turns, and again just park your thread just right tight at the end there so it's all streaming backwards nicely. Okay, time for some dubbing. Now you can probably tell from the well-worn nature of this packet that this is very well used. This is from Ellis, this is Scruffy dubbing, and this is a Gammarus pattern, which is a mixture of all sorts of stuff, all fairly natural hairs. So we've got some hare's ear in here, we've got some rabbit, and it just makes this fantastic spiky dubbing, and it's a lovely colour as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dubbing rope, which is kind of the same shape as the profile of the fly that I'm trying to cover. So it will be a lot thinner at the first part, bulkier in the middle, and then thinner at the end. So I'm just going to dub that on, just finger dub it. You don't really need any wax with this either, but just a really fine bit at the first part, not quite as tight in the middle, and again thinner at the other end. Now I don't know if you can just about see that, but what I'm trying to show you is that that is thinner there, and then as you get to the centre part of the dubbing rope it's thicker, and then it tapers off again into a thin bit. Just going to tighten that up a wee bit, slide it up to the back of the hook, just control my thread by shortening it down and just nice, fairly tight turns. Just using my finger and thumb on the other hand to just tighten the rope up a little bit if it gets a little bit baggy like it has there. You don't want to go again too far up towards the eye. Now that's lovely. What I am going to do just to help me control things is I'm going to throw in a whip finish at the moment just to make sure that my tying thread is controlled and is sitting on the end of the hook there so it doesn't fall off the eye when I take the rest of the materials up. Okay, so my dubbing's in. Now I'm going to grab a little hackle plier and I'm going to now bring up my underrib. It's holographic material, and I'm going to do a couple, not too many, but a couple of nice open turns. Just 3 or 4. That's 4, that's lovely. Just do one more, and I'm going to grab my tying thread and secure all that off so it's nicely in place. Just tighten that up too much. There we go. And trim off. Now at this stage, I quite like to give the dubbing a little bit of a brush. So before I pull my back material over, that shrimpy stuff, the green material, which is going to go over like so, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to grab my dubbing brush, which is a lolly stick with a bit of Velcro on it, and I'm going to give this a little bit of a hairbrush just to pull out a few fibres. What that does is it makes everything look really nice and buggy, and in the finished fly it will look extremely leggy. I'm sure you can see all those fibres pinging out in all directions. I'm just going to brush them all down with my fingers. It does look a bit messy at the moment, doesn't it? But don't worry about that too much. Just make sure my holographic's in the right place. It's just moved a little bit, that's fine. Now I'm going to pull my shellback material over. Again, just a little bit of tension on that, not too much. You just want to stretch it enough so it goes a little bit more see-through. Pinch and loop, and then just secure that off with some turns of tying thread. Really secure turns there as well, just to make sure it's nicely in place. Don't worry about the straggly bits at the moment. We can tidy those up later on. And then to trim this, I'm just going to stretch it and go in with the very tips of my scissors right at the point of that and cut off. Okay, again, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to throw in a whip finish, just a single or 2 turn, before I bring up my rib. Now, here's my nylon, the fluorocarbon that I used earlier, and I'm just going to do wraps of that, pulling down quite hard so it causes a segmenting effect on that soft flashback, and you'll actually start to see, hopefully, the holographic tinsel showing through the see-through rubber material. Nice even turns up the fly before you get to the end, and just keep tension on it like so while you shorten your thread down and secure it in place with 3 or 4 turns. Once you've done so, you can pinch it really hard and really bed that down. That's the beauty of this Nanosilk. You can pull really hard on it. If you're using something that's a bit less robust at this stage, just be really careful that you don't pull too hard, because you will snap your thread right at the end of the tie, and that's really frustrating, as I'm sure you know. Just going to trim off. Now, the only other thing I'll do here is I'm just going to use a Sharpie to colour that olive thread in for the head of this fly before I do my final whip finish. Just a nice dark brown, so you've got a little bit of contrast. This is where I think it goes a little bit caddisy, like a caddis pupa. You can, of course, experiment with different colours of dressing, and by all means play with the different colours of the stretch backs that you get. You can use a Sharpie to colour them in too. Just give it a little bit of a haircut there, it's got a little bit unwieldy. And then all I'm going to do is just again use my dubbing teaser to just pull out a few of the leggy bits of the dubbing, so it looks like living insect. There we are. Fantastic stuff. Now, if it's a little bit unwieldy, again, you can trim off, so you've got a bit of control. But that's a fantastic fly to use. But really, I suppose I'd use it most often as a dropper fly, so you might have something with a bit of weight to it on the point. But this, as a dropper fly above it, say 50 centimetres above, is absolutely brilliant. I hope you've enjoyed the tie. I hope when you tie it on, you catch a few fish. And please remember to give the channel a subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've seen today. Thanks ever so much for watching, and see you soon.